agree with them.
And they repeat it, but sometimes it's worse than that. They say, I hear what you're saying. I've talked to engineers. Mm-hmm. One time I was out camping, at our family, ranch, and I wasn't deer hunting, but we had some deer hunters there leasing the property, and they were all engineers. And I said, well, they found 2 of the passports in the rubble that day. That's impossible. And they said, I hear what you're saying, but as an article of faith, I can't believe that. And I was just like, well, that's crazy.
But see, the way I look at stuff like that is if somebody needs to believe something for themselves, that's fine for themselves. That's okay. Because trying to convince somebody of something that they don't want to believe is sort of a fruitless effort anyway. But at the same time, you have to be careful to preach to a choir. So really what myself as an artist and you as a pioneer in alternative media, really what we're talking to people is on the edge who are willing to listen. The people aren't going to hear you anyway. It's sort of irrelevant, you know what I mean? They're just going to put their fingers in their ears, or they're going to create a debate within themselves that's going to negate, no matter what you say, no matter how brilliant it is. And the people who already believe you, well, in some ways you're just preaching to the choir. It's the people who live on the edge who are really, they're uncertain of their own personal narrative, and they're looking for information. Those are the people that ultimately you're reaching out.
I totally agree. So many people go and speak to their family or whatever, and they get brushed off. They think, well, I'm done trying to wake people up politically, spiritually, whatever the case is. And I'm like, no. There's always going to be the mass of people that just want to be followers, that don't want to hear anything complex, that just want to go cook their TV dinner and watch Dancing with the Stars. We're looking for the people that are in love with information and real reality and who get the fact that it's interesting. That's who is going to govern our future. And that's why the globalists try to dumb everything down and have people not have a debate, because they're scared of people that do want to have a discussion.
If I can offer a personal take on exactly what you're saying, I think we're a lot closer to a tipping point in the consciousness of humanity than it would seem to be. There are people who have done studies of these types of things. You don't need 100% of the people to go in a particular direction. You only need like 20% or so.
Well, 10, yeah, the studies I've seen, 10,
okay.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say it's 20, just to make me look good. Let's say 20% of a given population needs to believe an idea for the other 80% to actually consider it as legitimate. Well, I think we're a lot closer to that number than you think. And again, it's not about the specifics of a particular idea. It's the idea to be open to the ideas. And I think we've seen a systemic dumbing down of the population over the last 20 years. Most of the people that I talk to, and I talk to fairly successful and intelligent people, believe that the country's been dumbed down. Some believe it's been dumbed down on purpose. Some believe it's a resource issue. There's not enough money for the schools, stuff like that. Doesn't matter. But I do see a different type of awakening going on where people are engaging in topics and debates about things that were always off the table. It's not uncommon for me to be in a restaurant and hear people at the next table talking about the Federal Reserve, because that idea has now been introduced into the mainstream culture via Ron Paul or somebody like that, saying, why is this there? Why is this even in the chain of things? And even the idea, it's called the Federal Reserve, and then you come to find out, well, it's not even a branch of government. That was shocking to me when I found out about 10 years ago when I saw a documentary by Aaron, I think it was Aaron Russo, right? Yeah. I happened to see him present the documentary, didn't even know what it was about, and was surprised. And so the point is as we're on the edge of these ideas, we're closer to the tipping point of people wanting to hear a different narrative, because the narrative that they've been fed is no longer working. You know what I mean? So yes, so you see a turning up of the volume of the opiating aspects of society, a dumbing down of our culture to keep people more salaciously engaged. But for this whole other part of the population, they're in a much more rigorous debate than I've ever seen in my life, and I know that you see that. That's encouraging to me. So if we can get a big enough number in that particular realm, then that other 80% is going to be much more likely to listen, because in essence they follow. They're not people who are going to take the first step into a new opinion.
Well, I agree with you. That's why the system is panicking and throwing out all the stops. And I found with those that are even partially awake, the acceleration of the tyranny is only waking them up faster. And we talk about...
But you see it's a calculation. It's like any general is going to calculate his risk versus his reward. Whoever's running those systems, whether they're benign, conscious, unconscious, whether it was the Soviet eras or the Nazis or the Khmer Rouge, at some point they have to make a decision. If we don't come in and kill all these people or wipe all these people out or suppress this particular idea, it's going to get out of control.
Wow, you just scared me with that, because Brzezinski, I've talked about this on air, 2 years ago said the people are waking up, the elite's in deep trouble. He made statements last month, and he's written about it similar in his new book that just came out, and he said 20, 30 years ago, it was easier to direct socially through propaganda 1 million people than it was to kill them. Now it's easier to kill them than to have them believe us. And that's what's dangerous, is the elite are now discussing killing people to stay in control. They realize that they cannot. Look, I believe we've already won. As you said, it's an exponential ripples in a pond. I can see it. Mm-hmm. The very fact that they're so greedy and want to destroy culture to control it and make people poor so we're controllable is going to make the empty bellies that cause people to wake up. So the elite have kind of engineered the direction they're going in, but they're not God. They're not all powerful. And now they're discussing really draconian things. And you see gun sales are at all-time records. I don't see this working.
But again, well, the way to counter darkness is with light, you know, and that's why I go back to the spiritual point. I think everything that you're willing to address is worthy of thought, and the difference is whether we shroud that in shadow, and anger, and frustration, and powerlessness, or we put light on it and say, you know what, I want to know the truth. You know what I mean? Because to me, it's what core central idea you come from. If you say, I want to know God, or I want to know love, or I want to know the truth, that will direct your discernment. It will direct what you care about. If that's true, which I'm sure it is, about the gun sales, that scares me, because that's essentially people reacting out of fear. Now, you may say that's prudent, and that may be. But in the higher octave, what needs to happen is people need to not be resonating with fear, because they need to understand, if they come from truth, that the right things are going to happen eventually. Now, whether you're a sacrificial lamb or not, whether you're willing to put your ass out there in the middle and get your head cut off, there's plenty of history to indicate that can go either way.
I agree. Let me just say this. I overall do not see it as positive that there's record gun sales, except that it's some form of action. It's not in a catatonic, narcoleptic coma. At least they're recognizing that there is a threat. I wish it was, I've said this on air, I wish you were at your city councils and at your state houses and knocking on neighbors' doors.
That's buying a gun, whether you would agree it's true or not, that's more responding to an existential threat. The real threat is in your local communities, where you're not taking care of the people in your local community. If everybody just took care of the people in their local community, it would eradicate a lot of this ability to control us.
Exactly, but at least it's some steps showing they know there's a problem. And I've said I wish you would use this as energy to go out and reach out to people, instead of talking about how you're going to shoot UN troops. You know.
Yeah, I do believe if we were to if we engage in if you're willing to engage in the idea that there's a controlling force that wants something to happen and it's negative, right? I'm on the side that believes that ultimately that ruling force wants the least amount of trouble. And the least amount of trouble is to keep people opiated, stupid, uninformed, and believing a narrative which is really simple.
Yes.
Good guy. I have a wrestling company, right? What do? Good guy, bad guy. Okay? So I sit there and watch all day. You watch CNN, you watch Fox, good guy, bad guy. Dumb, right? So my point is, you know, as long as we're willing to try to understand that the narrative's being narrowed, if we're willing to be awake and listen to our own being in there, and whether they agree with you or not, that is the revolutionary concept. That is the thing that leads to the victories that all of us want to have. A happy planet, a safe planet, a green planet, whatever.
It's an info war. It's a fight in our minds, not physical.
No, I don't, and listen, again, if we're willing to believe that there's somebody standing there behind a curtain that wants bad things to happen, if they had their druthers, my guess is they don't want any trouble. It's far easier if everybody just gets in line and watches the same TV programs and just it all dumbs itself down and it ends up looking like Brave New World. Take this, be quiet, go to your job, So I'm hopeful that we don't have to get to any point that involves anything horrific or violent, and that may sound a little Pollyannish, but I have to believe in that. I can't believe in the other version because that takes me into a darkness that I don't believe in. I don't believe in that darkness. It doesn't mean I don't believe it's not there, but I don't believe in that darkness. That darkness is not going to get me or you anywhere.
I know that when I talk to a lot of people in the power structure, they don't like what's happening, and they describe it as a kind of out-of-control beast. And it's all of our little actions that actually give power to the light or the dark. And I think in the final equation, it is about a resonance, about an energy. Closing comments on that.
I think it's as simple as this. We've all stood in a line, and, or we're all trying to go through the same door. It's in that moment that you don't turn to your neighbor, smile after you. That's the root of how these systems control us. Because if you don't, you can't even see the human being next to you as a human being with a family, a history. If your judgment from the get-go is, they're the enemy, they must be negated, I got to exist in my little bubble. I was on a plane the other day. The guy was completely in his little bubble, his little technological bubble. I didn't exist, he didn't address me, he didn't say excuse me. It was like I did not exist. And we all know what I'm talking about. We come in contact with. I've seen that 60 times here in the last couple of days.
They revel in it.
I don't know if those people are reveling in it. I don't think they even know what they're doing. But the point is if you engage in that behavior, if you sort of go along with the dumbing down of society, you're part of the problem. You have to stand for your own value. If you're willing to walk through life in kindness, in humility, that's the seed by which everything grows. And that's what I mean about the micro and the macro. If everything you're saying is true, the way to fight it is with your own being, with your own sense of humility and self. Now, of course, somebody's going to write, well, when they're coming over the wall, the redcoats are coming over the walls, I'm going to need my AK-47, okay? Well, they're not coming over the wall just yet. So I'm at this point where I believe in the energetic aspect of it.
Well, obviously, there's a time to reap, a time to sow. I mean, we're trying to be like Obi-Wan Kenobi and loving and friendly. We've got to defend ourselves, we do. But I do think it's a cop-out to just say, I'm going to buy guns and get ready for war. The war is intellectual and spiritual talking to people.
There is plenty of evidence to suggest in recent history that the war of ideas can be won. You see where certain military actions don't happen if there's the right public outcry. You see if the right people protest, the right people stand up, certain things don't happen. They don't go down as easy.
Look at SOPA. Look at the internet censorship. I mean, on so many fronts.
But see, there's an idea where most people understood the narrative and they figured it out. And you saw where corporations had a backpedal. And then I saw other people in my business come out and say, well, stealing is bad. They reduced the argument down to stealing is bad. Well, why has this bill got all this other stuff in it that doesn't have anything to do with stealing is bad?
Exactly. What's the best, I mean, there's so many, we're going to be putting websites up here on screen. What's the best website for people to visit and see all the great work you're doing? Tell us briefly about your new album coming out.
I have an album coming out probably in June, early June, called Oceania. We have old Smashing Pumpkins albums being reissued, which is pretty cool, with extra tracks and DVDs and stuff like that. I'm writing a book. SmashingPumpkins.com is probably the best, or my Twitter account. @Billy. Just @Billy. Do you have at Alex? I guess you don't have the hookup like I do.
I need that, yeah. Tell us more about the album, and then give us a little preview of what's going to be in the book.
The book is a spiritual memoir, essentially my life from the perspective of a spiritual one as opposed to a celebrity one. We've all read the celebrity. I don't think we need to read that version of my life. The album is called Oceania. It's coming out in early June, and it's a sort of people like kind of old school Pumpkins mixed with some prog rock. That seems to be the vibe in that.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Alex.
It's been amazing.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. We'll see you all back here tomorrow night and on the radio at InfoWars.com. A lot to think about. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds? Go to InfoWars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv for the latest headlines and cutting-edge information.